monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is...
The monarchy had survived abdications, scandals, wars, and family betrayals. But it had never heard an announcement like this. Standing side by side, William and Catherine did more than describe the institution they hoped to inherit. They placed limits on royal power, redefined the role of a future queen, and drew a protective line around their eldest son. In minutes, the old order was no longer merely under pressure. It had been given an expiration date. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William felt Catherine's fingers tremble against the folder before they began. He placed his hand over hers and whispered, "Once we say this, there is no return." She steadied her breathing and nodded. Together, they announced the Windsor Covenant, a formal plan for organizing the next reign. It declared that only 7 senior working royals would carry the crown's main public duties, with defined roles and stricter financial accountability. Catherine then delivered the clause that changed the balance of power. When William became king, she would chair the Crown Service Council, a permanent body coordinating royal charities, national campaigns, and the public work of senior family members. The future queen would no longer simply support the monarch. She would help direct the machinery behind him with real authority. Then came George. William confirmed that Prince George would not become a full-time working royal before 21. The protection mattered because the heir's childhood had already attracted expectations that once consumed his father. Catherine's voice tightened as she explained that education, privacy, and emotional readiness would come before permanent duty. For the couple, this was not theory. It was a promise to their son. One chair remained empty. King Charles was not beside them. His ceremonial seat, reserved for the reigning monarch at major family declarations, stood untouched. The absence mattered because it suggested either silent approval or a rupture too deep to conceal. William gave no explanation. Instead, he opened the final page and revealed 2 signatures, his own and Catherine's. They had not merely supported the plan, they had authored it together. The prince closed the folder. He refused questions. Catherine stared ahead, visibly moved, while the room fell silent for several long seconds before erupting. Behind palace doors, Charles received the document before his advisors could prepare him. He read the first page, set it down, and asked, who gave them permission to publish it? While the world absorbed the promise of a transformed crown, inside the royal family, the declaration had become something far more personal, a test of love, loyalty, inheritance, and control. Behind every constitutional phrase stood a private wound. William was not merely planning a reign. He was confronting the childhood that taught him what royal duty could take from a person. Catherine was not merely accepting greater authority. She was risking accusations that she wanted power. Charles faced the possibility that his son had already begun correcting his legacy. And George, still young, became the emotional center of a decision adults had delayed for generations. William understood the cost better than anyone. Long before he became the future king, he had been a boy watched by millions, expected to remain composed while his parents' marriage collapsed in public. He learned early that royal children could become symbols before they understood what those symbols demanded. That memory had never left him. It followed him into fatherhood, into every decision concerning George, and now into the heart of the Windsor Covenant, the formal plan defining how his future reign would operate. Catherine had changed too. She entered royal life carefully, measuring every word, and knowing that one mistake could become a headline. Years of scrutiny, family tension, and public responsibility had hardened her resolve without stripping away her empathy. William trusted her because she saw what palace advisors often missed. Duty could protect an institution while quietly damaging the people inside it. Before the announcement, Catherine asked him the question she had been carrying for days. Would chairing the Crown Service Council make her appear ambitious? The council, a permanent body intended to coordinate royal charities and public duties, would give her real influence. She feared Charles might see it as a challenge, and that other royal women might believe she was placing herself above them. William did not hesitate. He told her the role was not a prize. It was a burden. The future monarchy could not ask her to carry its emotional weight, calm its crises, protect its children, and then deny her the power to shape its decisions. Later, they sat with George without aides or officials. When the young prince learned he would not become a full-time working royal before 21, he did not smile. He looked at his father and quietly asked, "Did you get that choice?" William could not answer immediately. Elsewhere, Charles read the same clause alone. The king paused over George's name because the protection offered to his grandson revealed everything he had never been offered himself. Catherine had insisted on 21, after William first suggested 18. Legal adulthood, she argued, did not guarantee emotional readiness. Yet as one child gained protection and one future queen gained authority, Camilla felt something else entirely. The queen consort saw no equivalent role for herself, and the silence around that omission began to feel deliberate. The declaration may have carried William's voice, but its most consequential clause had come from Catherine, and that clause was born from a moment the palace had desperately tried to bury. Every royal rupture has a moment that later becomes the point of no return. For William and Catherine, it came during what should have been a controlled family ceremony. One misplaced briefing, one frightened young prince, and one sentence spoken behind a closed door exposed the danger of leaving the future unchanged. The Windsor Covenant was not conceived in a strategy meeting. It was born the night Catherine realized the institution was already beginning to claim her son. George had expected a simple rehearsal. Instead, during preparations for a major Commonwealth service, a senior courtier placed a thick folder into his hands. The service was a formal gathering representing nations connected to the crown, but the papers had little to do with that ceremony. Inside was a year-long schedule of solo engagements prepared for the 14-year-old prince without the approval of William or Catherine. The courtier spoke as though nothing unusual had happened. He said the schedule would prepare the next generation early, and insisted Charles had already been informed of the broader plan. William immediately sensed that something was wrong. George read the first page, turned pale, and asked his mother whether refusing even one appearance would mean he had disappointed the country. Catherine reached her limit. She removed the folder from her son's hands and closed it with controlled force. Then she faced the official and said George was a child before he was an heir. Her voice never rose, but William knew that calmness. It meant her anger had moved beyond emotion and become resolve. The courtier tried to defend the schedule as tradition. She refused to let him finish. Later that evening, William confronted Charles alone. The king argued that preparation was necessary because George would one day carry responsibilities no ordinary child could understand. His son answered with words that cut through every excuse. Preparation without consent is simply inheritance disguised as duty. Charles stiffened, then revealed the truth. He had approved early discussions about George's future, but he had never authorized 12 months of solo engagements. Someone inside the palace had stretched a general instruction into a fixed program, trusting that the sovereign's name would prevent anyone from questioning it. William finally understood the deeper danger. Royal officials were no longer merely carrying out decisions. They were creating obligations in the name of continuity, committing future generations before parents, children, or even the monarch could object. That night, Catherine placed the abandoned schedule between herself and William. She slid a blank sheet beside it and said, "Then we write the future before someone else writes it for him." The first words of the Windsor Covenant followed. When Charles learned that George's schedule had inspired the document, he summoned William and Catherine to a private meeting. No advisors would be allowed inside. No official could soften the argument. The promise made over a frightened child's abandoned schedule now had to survive the king. There were no cameras in the room, no applause, and no constitutional language to soften what followed. There was only a father who had waited most of his life to become king, a son who believed the institution could no longer wait, and a future queen determined not to let either man reduce the argument to pride. What began as a discussion about procedure became a confrontation over childhood, sacrifice, and who possessed the moral right to define the crown. Charles ordered every aide to leave before William and Catherine entered. 3 chairs waited around a low table, stripping the meeting of ceremony and making it feel like a family reckoning. The king spoke first. He said publishing plans for another reign while he still wore the crown risked creating 2 centers of power. The monarchy could not survive if the public began looking past the present sovereign toward the future one. William refused to accept that argument. He said the Windsor Covenant, the formal plan for reorganizing the next reign, was not an attack on his father. It was an answer to a palace culture that had nearly assigned George a public life without asking either parent. Charles reminded him that duty had been assigned to him before he understood it too. That confession changed the room. The prince answered that this was exactly the cycle he intended to break. The monarch heard something harsher. To him, his son was suggesting that decades of endurance had not been service, but damage passed from one generation to the next. Charles rose. He told William that the crown could not be redesigned around private feelings. The future king stood as well and looked directly at him. Then it will eventually destroy everyone expected to wear it. Catherine remained seated until silence replaced anger. Then she placed George's discarded schedule on the table and pushed it toward Charles. A handwritten question remained in the margin. When do I get to choose? The king read it twice. His resistance weakened, but another truth entered the room. Charles revealed that early preparations for George had been discussed during a wider household meeting attended by Camilla. He did not accuse the queen consort of creating the schedule, yet her presence raised a dangerous question. Who had encouraged officials to move faster than the family intended? Charles finally offered conditional consent. He would not publicly oppose the covenant, but he refused to endorse Catherine's control of the Crown Service Council unless its powers were reduced. The council, a permanent body created to coordinate royal charities and public duties, would remain largely ceremonial. The contract. Catherine closed the draft. She told the king that authority without power was only decoration, and decoration would preserve the system they were trying to change. The confrontation ended without reconciliation, yet her refusal transformed the dispute. The future queen was no longer defending William's plan. She was defending her own place within it. The struggle over the monarchy's future did not depend solely on the man destined to become king. It turned on whether Catherine would be treated as a decorative source of stability or recognized as one of the institution's principal decision-makers. For years, her influence had grown quietly, hidden behind restraint and discipline. Now the covenant forced the palace to confront a truth it had benefited from, but rarely acknowledged. She already carried power. The question was whether it would be named. Catherine mattered because the monarchy had come to depend on qualities it rarely admitted it needed. Her public trust, long-term charitable work, and ability to steady William during family crises had made her central to the future crown. She did not dominate rooms, she calmed them. Yet beneath that restraint was judgment, and William relied on it whenever loyalty, duty, and family collided. The Crown Service Council would make that influence official. The body was designed to coordinate major charitable priorities, review the work of senior royals, stop rival households from competing for attention, and publish an annual account of public results. It would turn quiet authority into measurable responsibility. That was precisely why the proposal unsettled Camilla. The queen consort sat alone with the covenant and circled Catherine's proposed title as chair. Then she asked the question no advisor wanted to answer. Why had no comparable authority been created for the reigning queen? To her, the omission felt less like planning and more like erasure. Catherine refused to turn the dispute into rivalry. During a private conversation, the princess explained that the council belonged to the next reign and was not a judgment on Camilla's service. The assurance was calm, but it could not remove the humiliation. Camilla heard respect in the words, yet she also heard a boundary being drawn around her future influence. Charles searched for another path. He read polling summaries, constitutional advice, and warnings from senior officials. But one photograph held him longer than any briefing. It showed a young William and Harry beside Diana. The king understood what the image represented. The institution had survived, but survival had demanded a terrible price from the people inside it. Anne gave him the argument he could no longer avoid. The Princess Royal said, unnamed influence was more dangerous than authority written down and made accountable. Catherine already shaped decisions. The covenant would not create her power. It would control it. Charles lifted his pen to weaken the clause. Anne placed her hand over the page and told him that reducing the role would expose the entire reform as theater. The king finally agreed. Catherine would chair the council with genuine authority, but its yearly report would go directly to the sovereign, preserving the crown's final oversight. The legal obstacle had fallen. The emotional one had not. When Camilla learned of the concession, she understood that Charles had protected the future queen's power over her objections. The machinery of monarchy had shifted, but one royal household was already beginning to fracture. Historic announcements do not remain trapped inside carefully written documents. They move through corridors, households, marriages, and loyalties, forcing everyone to calculate where they will stand when the future arrives. Within hours of the Covenant's release, royal offices began canceling meetings, rewriting responsibilities, and questioning long-protected privileges. But the sharpest consequence was not administrative, it was personal. A queen who had fought decades for acceptance now believed the next reign had declared her unnecessary. Palace officials moved quickly. Planned announcements expanding duties for non-working relatives were suspended, while the new 7-member structure was reviewed. The proposed core would center on William, Catherine, George after 21, Charlotte when ready, Louis if he chose public service, Edward, and Sophie. Anne would remain a senior advisor for as long as she wished. The plan promised discipline, but every name included made another absence impossible to ignore. Camilla confronted Charles before the day was over. She asked whether he understood what accepting Catherine's authority would communicate to the family and the country. The king said the decision protected the future. She heard something colder. Her sacrifices belonged to the past, while another woman would inherit the power she had never been offered. Charles reached for her hand, then stopped. Camilla asked whether he would have granted her the same formal authority if she had demanded it. The monarch could not answer honestly. His silence did more damage than refusal because it confirmed what she feared. He trusted Catherine with powers he had never imagined placing beside his own wife. The queen consort removed a prepared speech from her folder, tore it once across the center, and canceled an appearance that would have placed her beside Catherine the following morning. It was not an official protest. It was more personal than that. Camilla was withdrawing before anyone could watch her stand beside the woman now defined as the monarchy's future. Sophie received different news with the same heaviness. The Duchess of Edinburgh learned that she had been chosen as one of the 7 future working royals. Edward expected relief. Instead, she told him that being selected meant others had already been excluded. The trusted confidant understood that royal promotion rarely arrived without someone else's loss. Then William's phone lit up. Harry had sent a private message from California through their secure family account. It contained one sentence: "You protected him before the machine could own him." The Duke of Sussex had not spoken directly to his brother in months. William read the words twice, locked the screen, and walked away without replying. Catherine later found him alone, shaken by the recognition that the Covenant was not only protecting George, it was answering wounds shared by both brothers. William finally told her what had to happen next. Before the world judged the reform, he needed to speak with Charles again, not as an heir negotiating with a sovereign, but as a son confronting his father. The Covenant had reorganized the future, but it could not heal the past by decree. That required 2 men to enter a room without titles, and finally name what the crown had taken from them. The turning point came without advisors, legal papers, or ceremonial language. William entered expecting another argument about authority. Charles entered believing he would have to defend the reign he had waited decades to begin. Instead, father and son found themselves speaking about 2 frightened boys from different generations, one who had never been allowed to refuse, and another whose parents had finally refused for him. For the first time, the Covenant stopped being a political document and became an act of mercy. Charles met William alone in his private sitting room. Neither man carried the Windsor Covenant, the formal plan that would reshape the next reign. The king ordered tea, but the cups remained untouched. Without officials to translate anger into careful phrases, father and son had nowhere to hide. William spoke first. He said the reforms were not designed to shorten Charles's relevance or announce the next reign before its time. They existed to stop another generation from mistaking suffering for preparation. George could learn responsibility without being consumed by it. The prince wanted his son to understand duty before duty began defining every part of him. Charles finally revealed what silence had concealed. Hearing William promise George a protected youth had filled him with resentment. The king had endured loneliness, pressure, and obligations from childhood because he believed endurance was the price of service. If his grandson could be prepared with compassion, what did that say about everything he had survived? William did not dismiss the pain. He gave it another meaning. He told his father that the covenant existed because Charles had survived long enough to reveal what the old system demanded. His suffering had not been meaningless, but forcing George to repeat it would turn experience into punishment and tradition into revenge. The king walked to a cabinet and removed an old timetable from his childhood. Its pages were filled with lessons, ceremonies, speeches, and duties planned by adults who had never asked whether he was ready. Charles placed it beside George's rejected schedule and quietly admitted how little the language had changed. Then his grief surfaced. He could not remember anyone asking what he wanted or whether he was frightened. William's anger softened. For the first time, he saw his father not only as a defender of the institution, but as one of its earliest captives. Yet sympathy was not enough. William asked Charles to endorse the covenant publicly. Neutrality would leave the family divided and give resistant courtiers room to weaken the reforms. The monarch agreed. A king's final responsibility, he said, was not to preserve every tradition, but to recognize which traditions his heirs must be permitted to end. Before William left, Charles handed him the childhood timetable and asked him to destroy it. The prince folded it once and placed it in his pocket. "It should be preserved," he replied, as proof of why change had become necessary. Father and son departed separately, but the king's office immediately began preparing a statement of support. Their private wound had finally been named. Now the world would decide whether that reconciliation represented surrender or the beginning of a monarchy worth preserving. By sunrise, the Windsor Covenant had escaped the boundaries of royal commentary. It was being discussed as a constitutional turning point, a family intervention, and a declaration that inherited duty no longer justified inherited trauma. Crowds gathered, broadcasters abandoned scheduled programming, and newspapers printed language once considered unthinkable. Yet one image captured the public imagination more powerfully than any headline: a father standing behind his son's reforms, even though those reforms quietly judged the world that had shaped him. Broadcasters across Europe, North America, Australia, and the Commonwealth treated the declaration as the most substantial plan for a future British monarchy in generations. The Windsor Covenant, the formal agreement shaping William's eventual reign, had become more than a palace document. It was now a global argument about whether tradition should demand suffering from those born to preserve it. Constitutional experts focused on the Crown Service Council and its promise of public accountability. Palace correspondents returned repeatedly to the reduction of the working monarchy to 7 senior members. But the protection granted to George carried the strongest emotional force. A future heir had been given something royalty had rarely guaranteed: time to grow before duty became permanent. One London newspaper captured the public mood with a full-page image of William and Catherine beneath the words, "The Crown chooses change." Below it appeared a smaller photograph of George walking between his parents. The message was unmistakable. The reform was not only about power, it was about protection. Hundreds gathered near the gates of Buckingham Palace. A young father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders as Charles's endorsement was read aloud during a public broadcast. The crowd grew silent. Then applause spread through the gathering as the king described the covenant as a serious promise of service, responsibility, and protection. Not everyone celebrated. Traditionalists accused William of announcing his reign before it had begun. Supporters answered that open preparation was more honest than allowing hidden customs and unnamed officials to control the next generation. The argument was fierce because both sides understood the truth. The future monarchy had already changed. Catherine watched the coverage beside William as newspapers appeared one after another. Commentators called her the most institutionally powerful future consort in modern royal history. She reached for the remote, switched off the television, and asked only one question: "Is George all right?" Later, Charles joined the couple and their eldest son. The monarch placed one hand on his grandson's shoulder, publicly confirming that protecting the boy was no longer merely William and Catherine's promise. It was now the king's commitment too. The applause settled the public argument, but not the emotional verdict. The world had witnessed unity where it expected civil war. One final judgment remained. Had the covenant merely modernized the crown, or had it finally redeemed the family forced to carry it? The Windsor Covenant did not abolish royal duty, erase family pain, or promise that future generations would escape scrutiny. Its achievement was more human, and therefore more difficult. It forced the monarchy to admit that survival without compassion is merely endurance, and tradition without consent can become captivity. William and Catherine had stunned the globe because they refused to treat suffering as a qualification for sovereignty. By changing the future prepared for George, they also changed the meaning of everything Charles had survived. Charles signed the supporting declaration and gave the covenant full royal endorsement. His signature confirmed that the plan for the next reign would guide preparations without weakening his authority as sovereign. William watched his father set down the pen and understood that the gesture was more than approval. It was acceptance. Catherine's role was secured with equal force. The Crown Service Council, a permanent body coordinating royal charities and public duties, would hold genuine power, publish annual results, and report directly to the monarch. The future queen would no longer carry crushing expectations while being denied authority. George received the quietest victory. Every planned solo engagement was withdrawn, and his duties would remain limited and suited to his age until 21. William gave his son a copy of the covenant, but said he did not need to read it yet. The young prince placed it beside his school books, treating the future not as a sentence, but as something he would one day understand. Charles finally saw that his suffering had not been erased. His endurance had gained purpose, because the next heir would not be forced to repeat it blindly. Camilla, hurt by Catherine's growing authority, accepted that the agreement belonged to a reign beyond her household. The queen consort resumed her duties and chose not to obstruct it. William and Catherine returned to the room where the first draft had begun. He asked whether they had saved the monarchy. She answered that they had given it a reason to deserve saving. That was the final truth. The historic change was not merely a smaller royal family, a new council, or greater authority for Catherine. It was the principle beneath them. No future sovereign should surrender childhood, emotional freedom, or family security, simply to prove loyalty to the crown. William and Catherine had not weakened the monarchy by limiting it. They had strengthened it by separating duty from suffering, service from silence, and tradition from fear. The announcement that first appeared to challenge the crown became the decision that preserved it, not by defending every custom of the past, but by protecting those who must carry the monarchy into the future. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.